In this video, we're going to learn to create and edit text, and we'll begin by using the Import Edit Text tool here on the left-hand side. Now, when I click on that tool, it opens up a window, and you'll notice there's several tabs in this window. The Edit Text tab, there's an Advanced Text Options, and an Alignment tab. And I'll come back to those two in a little while in this video, but for now, we'll start with the Enter Text tab. And I'm just going to simply type in my name. And notice right away, as soon as I typed in my name, that the word is displayed here in the font that's currently selected. So that's the next step for us, is to select the letter style that we want to. It calls it a face name, but to me it means the letter style. When they have the little zigzag beside them, they're embroidery prepared fonts that have been digitized specifically for use with the Wing software. And so if you click on one, it will show you what it looks like. And if you actually hover over top of the face name window and you have a wheel mouse, you can actually scroll through the letter styles to see what they look like. And of course, you can always click on the drop-down list and then scroll through there to see that there's quite a long list of built-in embroidery styles that come with the Wing software. And when you get past those, then you'll see that there's also all of the TrueType fonts. So the ones that have a TT beside them, that means TrueType font. And so those are just fonts that are going to be included with your computer. And of course, you can download and add new ones, which makes it almost unlimited, the styles of lettering you can create. Now, if you choose a letter style such as Times New Roman, for example, that has, this is Times New Roman regular, but I can change that to be italic or bold italic, and it'll give a different appearance to the letters. And the size is 20 millimeters. Well, you can change that with this list here, but you can also, of course, change the size. And a lot of these things can, well, everything can be adjusted after you create the lettering. This is just sort of the initial step of getting it on your screen. Basically, you need to choose a letter style, type in a word, and if you just simply say OK, it'll allow you to attach your word to your mouse, and you can click to wherever you want to place it within your embroidery hoop, and then you can right-click to be done the sort of steps and see what the embroidery looks like. So it's as easy as that. You can create a new lettering just simply clicking on this. Once it's created, you'll notice that these letters are in a satin stitch. If they were bigger and I wanted them to be in a different style of stitch, so they're in a satin stitch because when I chose the lettering tool, satin was the current letter style that was chosen my object properties box. So I could at any time select this and say change to, and I could change this to be a step fill or even an outline fill, like a running line fill. Change to running. And so you can decide, I guess, the style of embroidery after you create lettering. So for example, if the current letter style or embroidery style is step, and then I click on the lettering tool and type in my middle name, and then maybe I'll scroll up to one of the embroidery fonts, and you'll notice with the embroidery fonts that they don't have normally any style to them. They're just usually normal, but if I want to, I can scroll through until I find one that, you know, we decide that we like or whatever. And then when I choose it, instead of saying OK, which will just give me the letter style sort of set on my mouse, if I choose 2-point line, see what happens now. I can, first of all, wherever I click is where the word will start. So I'm going to click now. And then as I drag my mouse, it allows me to see what the name is going to look like, first of all, in size. And I can adjust sort of the length of the line by dragging it longer and the position of the line. And if I simply click to let go, it will place that down, and then I could right click to finish and set that down. So I was able to set the size sort of by drawing the 2-point line. Now, a variation to that, maybe I'll just do, I'll undo this and then do my middle name again, just to show the small difference. With the 2-point line, this time I'm going to click once, drag to click the second point, and then when I click the second point, I'm going to click and drag so that I can also set the height of it. And in this case, I could make it sort of any proportions that I want, which could be, short and small, but sort of thick, or kind of average, or long and straight. But either way, I'm adjusting the length of the line as well as the height of the line with 2 clicks. And then when I let go, I right click to generate the stitches, and you're done. And once again, once it's created, I could change the letter style from a step to a satin to any style that you might want with just a single click. Now, what about the 3-point line? So if I click on the letter tool again and type in my last name, and then choose to create a 3-point arc, the first thing I have to do is kind of draw the length or the width of it. So I'm just going to put 1 click here, and then the second click here. So that's kind of the length, and then you get to decide whether your arc goes to the top or to the bottom. So if I want to put a lower arc for my last name here, I'll click right there, and so it fits the word congregate along that arc that I just made. Now, just as an example of using some of the, advanced features, I'm going to click on the word conquer good again, and I'm going to come back and click on the lettering tool again. And so it returns me to the window that belongs to this word. And I'm going to go to the alignment tab. And where it says vertical align and it's set on baseline, I'm going to change that to top and apply. And so you see what happened was the line that I drew, I now chose to set the word conquer good with the top, the line being the top of the letters that I drew. So anyhow, we'll go through the alignment and that in a moment, but I wanted to start by just simply showing how to input text with the 2-point line and with the single click, and how you could change back and forth between the different styles of embroidery. So yeah, we'll continue on now and look at sort of the advanced text options. Before I look at the advanced text tool options, I wanted to take the moment to look at another level of editing on the text, and that is when you select a word, of course, it becomes surrounded by your transform box. And this is generally the same for any object that we create, but it's especially important for lettering because you can resize your lettering with the transform box. You can stretch your lettering or squish the lettering. And so when it comes down to creating lettering and getting it to look balanced, we're often forced to come into these sort of transformations where we can change the size and shape. Another level of editing that may be required is to use the Edit Nodes tool. And you'll notice when I have the Edit Nodes tool turned on that it shows me all of the digitized points for each letter. And I can see whether they were curved or whether they were corner. And of course I could select on those points, and I could move them if I wanted to, and I could change their tangent lines. I also could right click along that line anywhere and choose to insert new nodes and change the nodes or smooth the nodes. So all of the same sort of capabilities that we've had when we were creating embroidery objects are similar with the lettering. Now notice when I'm in this style of editing where I have the nodes exposed, if I click and drag a box, I can select all of the nodes that are within that selection box. Now I got all of the letter E, and I got a few from the letter R that I can see. See how they get larger? The ones that are selected are larger. And I know that I don't want to have the letter R selected, so I'm just going to hold the Control key down and click on these ones to unselect them. And that should trim up my selection box. And this red one here looks like it might have been selected, and maybe that red one. Oh, anyway, let's see. On this side, I've also caught this red one and that red one. So I think if I try and move this now, oh, I let go. What a terrible thing to do. Let's try that again. So selecting all of these, unselecting this one. Oh, and see, I've missed that one. Okay, so there. I think I'm good now. I've got the whole letter E selected. That's what I was trying to show you, that you can pick up all of the nodes from one letter and move it to be, in a new location. You could stretch just that one letter to a new shape or height. Of course, you could rotate the one letter. So all of the transform tools, when you select a group of nodes, then you can then transform those nodes just as you could have with the entire word. Now, with the entire word, so remember when we originally set it, we had to pick a size, but once you select it with your transform tool, you can easily resize it to any size and any proportions. And even if you wanted to do italics or a slanting, then coming in the center and grabbing and dragging in this sort of fashion will slant the letters forward and backwards as well. So lots of ways that you can manipulate the letters after you've created them using the transform tool and the edit nodes tool. Now we're going to take a look at the advanced text options, and maybe what I'll do is simply just use the select all tool and then delete everything on my screen and start a new lettering object. And why don't we put in the word artistic? Okay, so I've chosen the word artistic, and we're going to move on to the second tab now. So we know we're going to get, this letter style with normal and 20mm letters. And what we're going to do is move on to the advanced text options. Now, why don't we try the enable fixed length? So imagine you've got several names that you want to place or words that you want to fit in a certain length. You can set an enable fixed length, and you can type in here the length that you want the lettering to be, and then when you say apply and I guess okay, then we can come in and click to place the word down and right click to finish it, and there's the word artistic on my screen. Now, if I was to start a new object, and I have that one selected, so I'll cancel, click to let go, and start a new lettering object. All right, my artistic workshop. And again, I know that I have that advanced option set to enable fixed length, and so when I enter that text, the word workshop will also be forced to the same line length as artistic. So it was, automatically generated to be the same size. So that's what that tool is about. And remember, you can always click on any word and then come back to the input edit text tool and re-look at the information that's set for that word. So I could change the letter style, or I could come to the advanced text options and say, well, maybe I've changed my mind. Maybe I don't want to have a fixed length. Maybe I want to place my lettering on an arc. And so then when I choose place lettering on an arc, I get to choose the starting sort of point and ending point of the arc. So I could make it be, a whole 360 degrees, or I can change the beginning and the ending with a slider to the degree that I want. So here I got it kind of 180 degree arc, and so whatever you choose here, you have the ability to set it between clockwise and not clockwise, and I can demonstrate why you do that in a minute. And then you also have the ability to choose the radius. So I'll just leave it set at 50 and say apply, and you'll notice right away that what happened, and I'll just zoom out so that we can see what happened. Sorry, zoom out, not in. And then I'll get it closer again. So the word artistic got changed to be on an arc, and the arc started and kind of went all the way around half a circle. Now, so if I click back on the tool, I can make adjustments to that. So maybe I don't want it to be quite so much of an arc. I can decrease where I could make it start and finish on a different place on the circle if I want to. So why don't I apply that? So you can see now the A is moved up, but the letter C is not, and you can I guess keep playing with these sliders and applying until you think you got it where you like it. And if you want, you can adjust the radius so it's 50. If I make it 60, it's going to make it sort of wider. If I go back to the advanced options again and change it down to 40, then it's going to make it sort of tighter. And so that's how you can adjust, using the advanced text options, the sort of shape of a radius. And let's see now. I'm going to create a new word again, and we'll put in premium. Say OK. Let's go back. Instead, I want to use a 2-point arc for the word premium. Forgot what I was doing. And when I use the 2-point arc, I'm going to purposely draw the line on sort of the vertical line like this. And then when I right click and set it down, I'll come back to the input text lettering options, and we'll come back to the advanced text options. Now, instead of having an enable fixed link, I'll turn that off, but I'm going to turn on the escapement. So this is going to basically rotate the letters along that line. Why don't I set them first of all at 45, just so you can see what happens. They're now going along my vertical line that I digitized, but they've been rotated 45. If I turn that all the way to 90, that's going to change. Oh, I didn't activate that. 45 to 90 and say apply, then they're going to go up and down like this. So if I say OK and zoom out, we'll be able to see more easily the way that they've laid out. So escapement is your ability to rotate the letters as they sort of fit along the line that, you know, the baseline that they belong to. So in this case, because I drew the line vertically, rotating them to 90 degrees is what makes them sit up and down along that line and read this way. So those are the advanced text options, and perhaps I'll just reset and then come back and look at the alignment options. We're going to take a look at the alignment tools. And so what I'll do is start a new lettering, and in the lettering box I'm going to type in my name again. But I'll put in my last name, and then I'm going to start a new line, type where I'm from. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And I'm going to say OK. All right, and I'll click to set that down, and right click to finish making it. And I'll zoom out. Now it's kind of big. Maybe what I'll do is just go back to the Edit Text tab and change it from 20 millimeters to be 10, just so that it's easier to look at. All right, so now we have something a little bit more along our sizes that I want. So, okay, if I select this, this is lettering, and there's multiple lines, multiple words. So Trevor Conkergood on 2 words on 1 line. We've got 3 lines, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and Canada. So when I use the Edit Text tool and look at the Alignment tab, there's several things that can be done here. First of all, just looking at the horizontal alignment. So on this horizontal alignment, I can choose, right now it's set at justify, which basically tries to balance all of the words to, as much as possible, fill up your box. And if I want, I could change that to be, for example, left, which if I apply, will take all of the words and balance them along the left side, and leaving all of the letters with equal spacing, so no different spacing for the first line to the second line, which is obviously longer because it has more characters, and then the third line, which would be the shortest. And so if I change the left to right, you'll get the same sort of effect, but on the opposite side. So these are, you know, standard sort of things that you're used to using in word processing. If I choose stretch to fit and apply, then it's going to make the letters stretch along the axis to fit. And we could also do justify, which will not stretch the letters, but will stretch the spacing or adjust the spacing along the sort of width of the letters. So that's what the horizontal alignment features are about. Now, maybe what I'll do is show you here on you can adjust sort of the spacing. So first of all, kerning pairs means sort of the built-in intelligence. If there was anything about the font that you'd selected that had letters that were taught to be closer together whenever you use the letter O beside the letter V. That's what this will do, turning on and off. There's none apparent in the font that I've selected. But then the next option is going to be your inter-character spacing. So if I increase that by even just 1 or 2 tenths of a millimeter and push apply, you'll see that it adds more space between the letters, and therefore it increases the length of the overall line of the lettering. I can adjust that inter-word, so just the space in between the words can be increased so that there's extra space from, between Trevor and Conquergood. And then interline, same thing, the space between the lines of the letters. If you want, you can go in and add more space between your lines of lettering. And the last thing on the alignment tab is the vertical alignment. So this is the baseline. Now imagine I've got 3 lines of lettering and I clicked to set them down, and where I click was the baseline. So the center was the baseline, and I could change that to be, for example, if I set it to top and say apply, then it'll push all of the 3 lines of lettering below the point where I clicked to set this lettering. And so maybe that's not as important for these 3 lines of lettering, but there would be situations where you may have 1 line of lettering, but you want it to appear below a line or above a line, based on where it fits within the logo that you're creating. So yeah, those are the alignment tools. And then I'll just reset myself, and then we'll come back and take a look at some other ways that we can adjust our lettering. We're going to continue looking at different ways to edit your lettering. And so I'll just quickly start up a new lettering object and type in the letter A. And then I'm going to choose maybe a different letter style. So I'll scroll through looking for something kind of bold like this, and choose to make a 2-point line just so that I can click and drag and make a fairly large size letter right off the bat. And when I click again, it sets it in place, and I'll just right click to finish. And notice that the style of embroidery was step. So I'd already selected step, and therefore I got step, which for a large letter like this, step would seem more appropriate than a satin, because the stitches are going to be, too long for a good satin stitch. So with step, what I wanted to show now was you could take this large letter and apply all sorts of interesting effects to it. So again, select it and choose right click. And then we have the add menu. Well, first of all, we could add sections. We could add a vector fill, a block fill, a form fill, an envelope. We've learned all about these already, just not specifically with lettering. And then we could choose a path. And so we'll work our way up to path. But we'll start right now with sections. So if I wanted to, I could draw basically a new section, which would represent an area of a whole. So I'm just drawing kind of a wavy line down here, and I'll just wave my way back and show that when I'm done, I right click and it carves that hole. So adding sections is the equivalent of carving a hole out of your lettering. Now if I select it and right click again, I could say add, and here you could add any of the different types of fill. So whether it be a vector fill, or because it's already got sort of that step pattern, perhaps a form fill would be more appropriate. So if I choose form fill, then again I get to draw a line, and I'll just maybe make another wavy line and show that this time my wavy line won't be a hole, but it will be an area defined within the lettering that has no stitching inside of the shape. So I drew that wavy line, and there's no step pattern inside of that wavy line. That's what a form fill is. And you could use, you could probably do a block fill. So for example, I'll just maybe create another letter for this. So we'll just do the letter B, 2-point line, and drag up a nice big letter B, and then right click to choose to add a block fill to that. And now I get to draw in a shape. So basically it could be just about any shape you want, some kind of a squiggly line, and when I right click it will let go, and it's basically going to repeat that line that I drew over and over within the shape. So remember, when we worked with the block fill, we always had the ability to come and reshape our little piece that we drew, and specifically move the overlapping segments of it to new and better locations or whatever. And if you don't like the shape you drew, maybe it just looks too odd and you're not getting the effect you want, you could remove points and add new points until you got something that gave you an effect that you did like. So yeah, so that's how you can use lettering with things like a block fill or a form fill. What about, maybe I'll create one more letter and do an envelope. So I'll choose the letter C, and again I can go, I don't have to do a 2-point line. If I click and let go, it's obviously going to be a little smaller, and if I want a bigger copy of it, right now it's on edit nodes, I'll just go to transform and show that I can easily resize and or stretch it with the transform tool as well. Now once I get it kind of big and piece of step like this, I have this empty canvas of step that I could edit. So we could choose, we're going to add an envelope, and right now it's set on direction, which means it would only affect the stitching within the letter C. So that might be interesting. So we'll say add envelope, and now it's up to us to decide what shape do we want to how do we want to affect the stitches within this letter C. If I do nothing but just give a simple rectangular envelope, then it would be up to me to come and choose the edit nodes, and then I would be able to move the nodes to decide the way that the stitches were going to curve around the letter C. And so we could do something a little bit more interesting than just the straight up sort of parallel fill. I've made one that kind of curves from the top to the bottom. I guess if I open the density up to be 1 millimeter, you might see it a little better. Maybe even at 2 millimeters, you would see it. It's maybe too much now. I'll turn off the underlay so it doesn't distract from it either. So you can see how we've got that contour pattern going by applying an envelope. So okay, maybe I don't like this envelope and I want to change it. So I'm going to say I'm going to just hit select that again, right click and say delete envelope. So we'll just start over with this one, and then we'll right click and say add envelope, and perhaps I could draw a manual one and make my own. And so now it would be up to us to decide kind of how we wanted to curve the stitches around our letter C. And so if I move my own points like that, then you see an entirely different way of sort of filling in the letter C. So that's how you can create an envelope or form fill, block fill, sections out of your letters. And so the next one is path, and I'll just reset myself to show you all about adding a path to your lettering. We're going to continue looking at lettering, and this time we're going to look at adding a path to your lettering. So I'll go ahead and just start a new lettering object, and I'm going to type in text on a path, just so we have some lettering to place. And I'll make it a little bit smaller and say OK. And I don't really like that letter stitching style any longer. I'm going to change it from a step. I'll just ask to change that to be satin. All right, so it looks a little more appropriate to me now. And so we're going to choose to add this to a path. So again, you select it and right click and say add path. And it gives me the option for, I guess, different styles of paths. And some of them I have to draw. So there's a single line. If I want, I can go with an arc, and I get to basically draw the arc. I can go with a circle, and again, I get to draw it. Or I can go in with some predetermined sort of wavy and squiggly lines. So yeah, I'll just, for example, choose this straight line and say OK. So all it really did was take my lettering and put a path underneath it. And now that there's a path underneath it, I could select that lettering, go to my edit nodes, and I can see the 2 points of the path. And if I want, even just with the tangents, I can move them and change the way it looks. If I want, I can right click anywhere along the line and choose to add, insert node is what I meant to say. And so now I can add sort of additional points and create really any sort of path that I want for these letters to fit along. So that's adding text along a path. And let's just try some of the different kinds. So again, I'll start a new lettering object and just say lettering on an arc. It's not spelled right, on an arc. And so again, instead of choosing a 3-point arc here, what we do is we just set the lettering down, and it says lettering on an arc. And then I'm going to right click and choose to add a path. And again, I can choose that upper arc like this. And now it's up to me to put in 1 point, 2 points, and then draw the third point of the arc. So very similar to doing a 3-point arc, you can create a path. Now the difference is, I guess, with the path, the lettering is fit to that path versus drawing it. Yeah, it's very similar. One more time, I'll go with the lettering on a path and do the circle ones. So let's do a longer line. The wonderful world of embroidery at the size of 10 millimeters, and say OK, and that's going to give me a long line of lettering. Now we will choose that selected and choose to add a path. And this time we'll go with the circular path. Now, I have to draw the path by clicking and dragging. So if I click down at the bottom and then drag up and over, I create an, basically an arc. And those words will fit all the way around it, 360 degrees around it. So if I click off, you can get the idea that it says the wonderful world of embroidery all the way around the inside of that arc. So a little different than drawing a 3-point line, maybe quicker in some respects and maybe not as easy really in other respects, but it's a different way of doing it. You can add your lettering to a path. I guess the main thing with the path is you can do as I have here and create sort of an almost any shape path. Now if you don't like the path you got, you can always come in and choose delete path. And do I want to keep the distorted shape? I'll say no, so it'll return it back to the original. And then you could start over and say, well, okay, that didn't turn out. Maybe I'll try a different path or whatever. So I'll do it one more time, path, and just choose one of these sort of predetermined ones. And you get to choose the slider to see how much sort of distortion it gets. But yeah, so now we can place our letters along a nice sort of curve like that. So the wonderful world of embroidery along a path. Yeah, so that's fitting your lettering along a path. And what we'll do now is we'll come back and I'm going to talk a bit more about, we're going to do break apart text and joining it back together. I'm going to talk about how you can break apart lettering and join it back together, and I guess why you would do that and what happens. So what we'll do is we'll start a new lettering object and just type in break apart. Give you an idea, and I'll just create a 2-point line and click once and drag and click again to set it down and right click to let go. And so now I have some lettering, and maybe an example of why you might want to break something apart. So for example, I'm going to come back to editing this lettering and I'm going to go to the advanced options and change it from having a fixed length to be on an arc. And so we'll just apply that and see what it looks like. So now that my lettering's been placed on an arc, and maybe I'll just bring it over here so we can see it all. There's spaces between them, and it's causing like a trail thread. Maybe you'd like to have that trimmed out and you want to be able to use a thread trim command. You could select on top of these letters, and first of all, breaking them apart would make them individual letters, because right now, if I tried to insert a trim command onto this lettering, all it's going to do is trim at the beginning or at the end of the lettering. It's not going to trim in between each letter. So this is where we need to learn to use break apart. And now that I've broken apart those letters, it'll actually trim in between each letter versus, just once at the beginning and at the end. Now, if I want, I can show you, just if I click on a letter, that letter is still sort of contained as being a letter, so it's no longer a word, but yet it didn't, I guess my point is, when you break it apart, it still leaves each letter as something you can select and manipulate, the individual letters of the word. So if you right click on top of a letter and break apart again, now you're breaking that letter into its individual components, the individual parts that it takes to make up that letter. So it's sort of two levels. So if I zoom back out and select one of these other words that we've done, so we'll do lettering on an arc, and I'll right click and choose to break that apart. And so now each letter would be its own individually selectable object, and if I want, I can select multiple of them and transform them in any way, whether it be resizing them or activating a trim command on them or whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's break apart. Now, the opposite of break apart is to join letters. And so, for example, when you have things joined together, the software will know to teach the point in between. So let's look at something smaller like this word wonderful and see how it's got closest point connections in between all of the letters. If I was to select that and then break it apart, it no longer learns the difference. It'll start and end the W here and then jump over to the O and start and end the O in its own place. So it no longer knows that all those letters belong together, and it should learn, starting and ending points. Now, if I was to drag a box to select some or all of those letters again, and then right click on top of them, I can use join. So that's the opposite of break apart, is join. And once I've joined the letters, they're now back together and able to learn, the shortest distance between the enter here and enter here to connect to the letter N. So that's one way that you can break apart letters, and then you can join them back together again. So we've covered a lot about lettering, and there's really one main topic left to cover, and that's name drop. And it's a pretty substantial topic all on its own. And so I think I'm going to end off this lettering video now, and I'll start another video just for the name drop functions.